p.m. And I will ask if there's any public comment. Okay, then it is my great pleasure to call up Liam Shaker. He is a graduating senior tonight and has done some remarkable things that we just want to brag about and cheer him on. And thank you for coming, Liam.
Thank you for having
Nice to
me.
see you. All right, Dr. Cummings.
So annually, every district in Central Mass recognizes one scholar from that given district for being a scholar, athlete, and leader. This year, our choice was an easy one with Liam Shaker. Liam is a valedictorian of the class of 2024, is the class president, captain of the lacrosse and football teams, I believe, correct? And even more importantly, to all involved, he's just an exceptional person, and that really stands out. So we celebrated his nomination with a luncheon at Holy Cross on March 21st. So congratulations, Liam.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, we usually try to bring the scholar up and just recognize you in front of the committee for all your achievements. So I'll kick it off, even though I usually go last, because I have had the privilege of knowing Liam since he was about 6 weeks old. We were in a mom's class together with his wonderful mother, so our kids were babies together. I like to think I probably had a small part in his success, because we used to sing songs. No, but Liam, you have grown into a remarkable young man, and very proud of you and all your accomplishments. And I'm not going to ask any questions because I don't know if any decisions have been officially made, but I'll open it up to the committee if they have anything they want to ask or say, Liam.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
College. I'm afraid to ask still. I'm still afraid to ask. Post-traumatic.
Do you have anything you want to say about your experience, about the luncheon,
Well, yeah, the luncheon was a wonderful experience for sure. I actually met a lot of good people, a lot of brilliant, bright minds, and I don't know. I think it really brought the concept of connections into my head, because actually, I play lacrosse and I'm a huge fanatic about it. I love it, obsessed with it, and so one of the principals for the Uxbridge High School was actually the coach at Princeton for soccer, and he was really close with their lacrosse coach, who is world renowned, one of the best lacrosse coaches in the world. And I just think that's amazing that someone that I'm meeting with knows one of the greatest lacrosse coaches of all time. I just think that's so cool. And it really just brought that concept of connections into my head, and it just made me think, wow, there are so many brilliant people here, and there's so much I can learn just in general. And I thought that was a really cool experience in general.
I just want to commend you too, Liam, on all your hard work, all your successes, but also, your sort of sense of public service. I know you've done things to raise money for worthy causes in town and beyond town, and I just think the ability to focus on your academics, focus on your athletics, and be, sort of mindful of the world around you is really impressive. So I just want to call that out as well. I just think you've done amazing things here. We're all very proud of you.
Thank you.
Liam, is there anyone from Grafton in the schools that you feel like kind of made a big difference in your education, or anybody you want to, besides all of us, of course, of course, and Dr. Cummings? Yep.
So it would be easy for me to just say everyone, but I mean, one person that I actually wanted to say something about is Miss Bro, who I had her first year in 8th grade, and she was really engaging, very kind person, and then when she became the class advisor for the class of 2024, I grew a really strong connection with her, and she has always helped me out, given me advice, and that's just something that I can always like look to, ask a question, and just someone I can talk to when in the building. And I really appreciate her for that.
Great.
Throughout all my high school years. So
Thank you, Liam. Any other thoughts or questions? We don't want to keep you too long. I just wanted to congratulate you, and we're
Yeah.
excited for everything that you've accomplished, and good luck, and we'll see you at graduation.
all right,
All right.
that's awesome.
Thank you. Oh, I always make people do a picture, so
Okay.
you want to come and do a picture with Dr. Cummings?
Yeah, sure.
I do. I'm in communications. Oh. Proud mom. Oh, I'm not getting, oh, you're not. All right, congratulations, Liam. Good to see you. Thank you. All right. And Nicole, we're gonna kick it up next with Nicole McDonald, who's gonna give us a special education update. Thank you, Nicole, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me back. It does say Chris Kitchell up there
Yeah.
as well. I will say he has now a 4-week-old at home. Well, 4 weeks on Friday, so I kind of gave him the pass on being here tonight. Although, he was like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yes, please stay home and take care of your 3-week-old and your wife, please." So this is from both of us, but I'm just the lucky one that gets to be here. So, just going to quickly go over what I'd like to go over tonight. Like, we're back. Thank you for having us back. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things both myself and Chris have been focused on over the last year, or since we saw you all, I think it was back in October. The tiered focus monitoring, how we did, what were the results, all that good stuff, and reporting out on our next steps. The new IEP, which is something in special education that is a lot of talk about. So I figured I'd update you all on where we are in our rollout, and what we have to go, and what our next steps are on that front as well. And then talking a little bit about professional development, what our special education staff have been participating in over the course of this year. And then, of course, getting to some fun stuff with regard to some extracurriculars and things like that that have been going on for our special education population. So, this lovely picture that's going to apparently be on our website, but thank you for having us back. Neil Trahan forced us all and forced fun to take this lovely picture. So me and Chris, and then Candace and Anne-Marie, I will say, I want to give a quick shout out to Anne-Marie Bloch and Candace Dunn. They're saving us in the special education office in a lot of ways, and probably even beyond. You'll see Anne-Marie doing traffic duty, which she got roped into by somebody to remain nameless. So they're just great additions to our special education department. Candace was with us, but Anne-Marie's new this year, and of course, Chris is new this year. So I figured I'd give some faces to all the names folks might be hearing, even though that's an awful picture, but
No,
we're
it's
gonna let that go.
Great.
It's fun.
So what have we been up to this year? So I did try to outline some of the things I've been focused on, some of the things Chris have been focused on. Of course, there are things that we both work on together and that we, consult with each other on, supervision, evaluations of staff, things of that nature. But this has been kind of our real focus. Chris being new this year, I will say his focus has really been getting to know our special education programming, getting to know the staff, and that's staff across the board. Walking into a building, you might see 100 different adults, and who are all those adults? And that does take a little bit of time. So he's been working through getting to know all of our staff and the buildings themselves, observations of our special education programming, having a good understanding of what programming we have in each building. Of course, reviewing IEPs. Chris and I review every IEP that comes out of our office. So, you know, he has his portion of IEPs he's reviewing, I have mine. But that's been a great opportunity too for him to see how the IEPs are currently written, how our team chairs are doing in that process, how they are facilitating those meetings. And then Chris has really spearheaded co-teaching professional development for us. So he did a wonderful professional development train the trainer in specific to co-teaching. And then was able to bring that to a group of teaching staff, co-teaching pairs through the process of about 5 hours of actual PD. And then that continued on for some staff that opted to do that for another 5 hours in order to earn some PDPs for their licensure. So that was something we kind of threw at him on his first year, and he owned it and did a wonderful job. We got a really great feedback. So we have him and I are planning on how we're bringing that professional development opportunity to more people within district and expanding how we're able to train everyone that's working on co-teaching on that. You know, each year, sometimes you'll get a new staff member. Each year, we might get a new pair to co-teachers that haven't paired together before. So having the train the trainer model for that, where we'll have Chris, who will be a trainer. He is also pulling in one of our teachers as well as kind of his co-trainer, so that it's not just, you know, an administrator, it's a teacher that's also on the floor to do those trainings with him. So we're super excited about that opportunity. It went really well so far, so we want to carry it through even further. And then for me, I have been the new IEP rollout. It's not very exciting, but it's something that I've been really focused in on and making sure we do all the steps to make sure it's an effective rollout for our IEP teams and for our families. I've also been doing some work and roping Dr. Cummings into some of this work on our inclusion-based programming, what that looks like, how well it goes, what are our strengths, what are our areas of need, and really exploring that. So through, so far this year, I've done different interviews with principals, we've done some walkthroughs of our special education programming in some buildings, and we're gonna continue that through the rest of this year, and really develop some planning for moving forward on how best to ensure that we have the best inclusion model for our special education students that we can have. I've also been doing a lot of, aside from the co-teaching PD, the PD planning with Jen Mannion, our Director of Curriculum, with Mandy, to really make sure that all of our staff are getting the proper professional development that is going to be valuable for them in their specific roles. So I think that that's an important aspect of what we've been working on this year. And then making some additional connections across different related services and different disciplines. So this year, we actually did a larger, which scheduling an area for the amount of people I had was a little bit difficult, but I figured it out and we made it work. But we did a combined meeting between our school psychologists, school adjustment counselors, speech and language pathologists, and BCBAs to discuss social skills. And because really all of those disciplines focus on the social aspect of things and in different ways. So redefining what that means for each discipline, labeling social behavior versus social emotional skills versus social pragmatic skills, how we define that and how we can help and coach our teams on the use of those skills for different disciplines. And if we're seeing a need, really exploring which discipline is best able to address that need. So that's some additional work that we've been focused on this year as well. That seems like a lot. I'm gonna move on. Tiered focus monitoring update. So just a reminder of what that is. It's been called 400 different things, used to be called CPR, so tiered focus monitoring is really when the Department of Education comes out to Grafton to really explore our policies, procedures, our facilities, to make sure that we're in compliance with the regulations that are outlined for us. So we did have the opportunity to have, in December, folks come out. It was about 3 or 4 people came out and went to different buildings, sat and interviewed different folks, did some record reviews, and we did receive some really great reviews on all of the things we were doing. I would say like glowing about how like we were able to present all the regulations to them in a way that shows we are in compliance. And I will say with all of that, this was, I think when we were here last time, I described that it's a 6-year process. The first 3 years are mainly focused on special education. The last 3 years are focused on civil rights and special education. So this was that section, the civil rights and special education. So I will say, Jen Mannion, Mandy, Dr. Cummings, like it was an all hands on deck situation to get and make sure we had everything we need, and we did. So that was really great. The one exception that we did get some feedback on was on our professional development for all staff in the area of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So that was not a part of our like mandatory trainings at the beginning of the year. And so that was the one area that we did get some corrective action on. So with that corrective action, we do have next steps for that. So we have to submit a corrective action plan, which we did do back in February. And then we have to provide a progress update on March 29th, which has actually already been submitted through our work really with Mandy in creating kind of and exploring what we have out there for our mandatory trainings. We were able to work with, I think it's ArcsEd, as a training platform, and it had exactly what we needed to submit. So that was lovely. So we were able to submit the materials that we were going to have and our training plan, which really was to make that part of our mandatory trainings at the beginning of the school year that all of our staff will participate in. So that will cover that piece of the regulation that we were missing. And then, of course, in September of 2024, we have to provide evidence that we did that. So we'll have another submission at that point, and we'll get a results that, you know, we were in compliance to our corrective action plan. The new IEP, so just a reminder, the official rollout does not start until the 24-25 school year. Going to quickly go, we did training for all of our staff, and when I say all staff, I mean all staff. And this was a little bit of part of my training because, you know, change is hard for a lot of people, and I think sometimes there's, oh no, what does this mean for me? And it's, you know, a real crisis sometimes for a lot of individuals. So I liked this quote in the sense of like, we're owning it. Like, we don't have a choice. This is happening, and this is how we're going to do it with all of our next steps. So far, Chris and I did a Train the Trainer back in October, I think, right before we met here. Then our team chairs have done specific training on what the new IEP looks like and how to transition over from the old version of the IEP to the new version. We've done all staff trainings. We have 2 trainings left on our kind of general overview. That's for Grafton High School, and then we're training all of our paraprofessionals specifically as a group on that. So we can really target what the paraprofessionals need to know much more specifically. And then we did a parent orientation break before the break with our CPAC. But that's not all. We still got a lot of steps to go. So going through that, some of our next steps, we are going to do more parent training. Our plan is to do grade level specific training. So my hope is to do like a North Grafton, South Grafton training on the new version of the IEP, a North Street, Millbury Street training. For folks that have students with special education needs, a preschool IEP does look very different than a Grafton High School IEP. So we want to make sure that those components that won't align for the different age groups are addressed for the age group that it will. I don't want to go through the transition planning form with a parent whose child just turned 3. You know, I think that might be a little too overwhelming in the sense of, oh, holy cow, that's what I have to come. So we're going to do much more targeted to the age group. So, you know, the MCAS pages come in for our Millbury Street, North Street group, but they're not relevant yet for preschool to grade 1. So we're trying to make it much more targeted. Those trainings will be done by our team chairs, with myself and Chris participating with them. And then I'm also, which I'm honestly going to hate, do a Loom of my voice training for parents on the new IEP. And even more, I'm going to hate, our team chairs, the plan for next year is each time a parent is invited to their team meeting, when they will have to be kind of introduced to the new IEP for that year, they're going to get a copy of that, my lovely voice training, it's through email. So we're going to make sure that even at your IEP, so if you participated in our June, you know, parent orientation, but your team meeting isn't until March of the next year, we'll have that training to be able to have parents be able to review. Our goal is to make sure that parents coming into their team meetings over the next school year really understand what it's about and why it's a little bit different, and, you know, all of those nuances, so they're not blindsided in any way coming into a team meeting. So we've probably been talking about it too much, but it's something we want to make sure everyone knows about. Like I said, for staff training, we have Grafton High School and the paraprofessional training left to do for all staff. We're also going to be doing some more special education technical assistance training. So when we work through our IEP, our special education staff, our special education teachers, related service providers, they actually input certain aspects of the IEP. So their goals, accommodations that a student might need. The service providers do that, not the team chair. So they need to know where they're putting things, if that makes sense. So we're really going to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of each page and what our special education staff input is going to be, so that they know going into our next school year. And then our PowerSchool program, so PowerSchool Special Programs, which is our special education and 504 programming, we'll just have to switch over to the new version, which apparently is just a button, which is a little overwhelming, I think, for me. But I'm going to click that button, and we're going to move over to new IEP. So that we'll do in August. Our goal is to then do any ongoing technical assistance we need. So, you know, there's always like glitches in the matrix, right, in that regard to like rolling out something. So we want to make sure that our staff and parents are, you know, are helped through any glitches that come up. So we'll continue to have technical assistance trainings and things like that with regard to the rollout. Professional development. So in combination of some of our district-wide professional development and then special education specific type professional development, I've tried to outline like what we've been doing this year. So some of this is not just me, it's Jen Mannion, Tracy Kalo, different folks have all participated, Neil Trahan, in this professional development that I'm outlining here. But the reason I'm including it is because our special education staff are also participating in all these things, and it will influence their use of their special education techniques. So you'll see, I had the co-teaching PD up there, the new IEP. We always have trainings in safety care, which I think we discussed last time, de-escalation. We also, North and South Grafton Elementary School are also focused in on PBIS and have teams, PBIS teams that are working through different planning and execution within their buildings. Last year they did a lot of training. This year is they're starting their implementation phase. So a lot of our special education staff, behavior learning folks, school adjustment counselors, our principals are a part of that, huge part of that. So I wanted to make sure I include that here. Purposeful play is something that we had training with our preschool teachers on. So Melissa Johnson, our preschool coordinator, went and was trained on purposeful play and brought that information back to our preschool teams and trained them on really what that means. So play with the idea of building skills. It's purposeful. It means something. And then, of course, Neil Trahan would be super happy. AI, AT, that's been something that I think folks are, really looking at and exploring how that influences their practice. And I think that includes our special education staff. And then, of course, multiple means of in expression. That's something that Tracy Kalo has been spearheading with our secondary level, which I'm sure she spoke about. And our special education co-teachers have also been participating in those trainings and pilots. So in addition to all of that, we also have had the opportunity to have a lot of our related service providers and special education staff participate in different trainings through their professional organizations. Lifeline for Kids, you'll see that in the middle. That was our trauma-informed practices training that we provided to all staff in district. I think we have the one training left, and that's middle school, high school in May. So Zlatina Kostova was our trainer from Lifeline for Kids. She was wonderful. She provided a lot of tips and tricks to our teachers on how to set up your classrooms in ways that can be responsive to students that might have some traumatic background in their history. So I also had up here our speech and language pathologists went to their governing body, ASHA, their conference. It was in Boston this year, so the excitement from our speech and language pathologists about that was a lot. It usually is in different parts of the country, so they were very excited, and we were able to send some of them to that. And then our school psychologists went to the MSPA, I guess you would call it, the MSPAA conference this year. Some of our BCBAs went to the Babbitt conference, which is the Behavior Analyst Conference. So we were able to work through a lot of that professional development for our related service providers as well. The Mass Partnership for Youth is something that a lot of our school adjustment counselors, school psychologists are using, much more focused in on social emotional well-being and trainings and webinars for that. So we've definitely used that a lot this year as a resource. And then we continue to train folks on Wilson reading. So that was also a lot. I apologize. So the fun stuff, this is the stuff that makes me happy. I start this with our school district does a wonderful job including students with disabilities in all extracurriculars and different activities. The extracurriculars I'm going to present are those that are specific to students with disabilities, that is kind of the goal for them. So I think that when I present this, I'm not saying that there's not other opportunities for students with disabilities, so I want to make sure I kind of caveat that. But these are some of the ones that are directly affiliated to the special education department. So with that, we had another successful Best Buddies prom the Friday before break. It was at Oxford High School this year. Last year it was at Grafton High School, so they rotate every year. I think the year before that was at Auburn High School. So it was, from my understanding, a really enjoyable night, and all the students really had a blast. So that was like I said, the Friday before break. And then Unified Sports Basketball just finished up, so this was some action shots from Unified Basketball at Grafton High School. And we also have students from the middle school that participate in the Unified Sports with the high school. So we have basketball, track, and bocce are the three seasons of Unified Sports we have. And then our Special Olympics event. So last year, and I will give a huge shout out to Kelly Kula at Millbury Street Elementary School. She's the team chair there. She lives in Leicester, and her kids go through Leicester Public Schools. So she helps organize for Leicester Public Schools their Special Olympics. Last year, they invited the students from Millbury Street School to go. So our students within our more intensive needs classroom went to the Special Olympics at Leicester last year, and it was awesome. Kids, staff alike, everyone had a great time. They had matching shirts. It was a lovely event. So this year, they have branched it out for us. So we have now invited all the classrooms, intensive needs classrooms, life skills classrooms from kindergarten to grade 12 to participate in the Special Olympics this year. So we're doing it on May 17th. Still matching shirts and banners and flags. All of our intensive needs teachers and life skills teachers from the high school are attending. Staff attending, of course, with students that might require that. We're arranging the transportation and we're doing it. So that's a really exciting event for us. It's not something, the Special Olympics is not run by Leicester Public Schools. It's run by the parents of Leicester. So it's a great opportunity for our kids to get out there and showcase themselves and have a blast. So we're lucky that, Leicester is also, giving us a hand and letting us participate in that as well. So it's a pretty exciting event we have coming up. And I will share pictures the next time we are back. And, sorry, that was a lot. Any questions?
That was great. Thank you so much, Nicole. Appreciate the update for sure. Any questions? Amy?
Thank you, as always, for so much information. I kind of wanted to get into the new IEP just a little bit. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but can you help me understand kind of what's the heavy lift on the new IEP, I guess? Like it's a form that they fill out, right? I understand
Sure
that.
is.
And what's the difference in terms of what information is being put into that form now?
Almost all of the same information.
Okay,
It's
just formatting.
definitely reformatted in a different way. So it's reformatted in a way that is much more reader-friendly,
Okay.
much more concise, a lot more check boxes and less narrative format. Right now, our current version of the IEP was developed in 2001. So we're, at about 23 years of that version. And they've kind of just added things to the end, as we went along. So we add a supplemental form, and then we add this supplemental form. So all of that is now built into the IEP itself, in the right spots, if that makes sense. So a part of our IEP is reviewing students that might have needs that might result in being a target for bullying. Right now in our IEP, that comes at the end of the IEP, right before like a parent's signature, because it was added after the fact, right? So as education has expanded, they just added different things. So now in our new IEP, it's really a new version, I should say it that way. The bullying statement is built into the area of needs and social emotional. So it kind of is much more linear and makes more sense as a document. When I went through our staff training and our parent training, it's actually very easy to look at the old IEP and say, oh, okay, that's now here. This section is now here. I get it. And you can, everything from the old version of the IEP is still there. It's just in different spots to make it more reader-friendly, to make it more concise, to make it a little bit more about the individual child. I will say it's added different specific questions regarding students with English learning needs. So it specifically asks if the student has English learning needs, which our old version does not ask that, and there's actually not a supplemental form for that on our old version. Our IEPs do include that. Our team chairs include that because it's an important facet to a child and their education. So it asks specifically about that and then what their planning is through EL. So I think that's a great addition to this version. The other addition that is in there, it specifically asks about AAC, or alternative and augmentative communication. And although we included that in our old version of the IEP, it didn't ask us that as a specific question. So now it does, and it helps us work through that through the accommodation section, which is great. The other piece that I know this is going to sound really dorky, so I apologize. As I started to say it, I was like, ooh, that was really geeking out a little. So the other piece that I'm excited about is there is
We're all good.
okay, good. There's a separate service delivery grid for extended school year. So that's exciting in a lot of ways. Right now, all of our extended school year services go on their regular service delivery grid. So it's all kind of mixed in there. For some of our extended school year providers, it's hard to find. It's hard for us as, organizers to really pull that stuff. We always do it and we get it, but it does get a little messy and confusing. So now there's a separate service delivery, a separate transportation for extended school year. So that is also very exciting.
We call that passion.
I really actually love the new, honestly, I really awkwardly love it.
Can I build off your question for a sec? So just so parents understand, because it's IEP season, will people having IEP meetings in the next weeks see the new version or the old version, right?
Old
It's the old
version,
version still.
yeah. So we are
I just
going
want
to
that clear
move
for folks.
into the new version at the next meeting date. So any annual reviews that occur, or, if a student has an initial IEP, it's their first IEP, it will be the new version of the IEP starting on the first day of school. So I hope we don't have a meeting on the first day of school, but if we do, it's going to be the new IEP, any reevaluations. So I will give a huge kind of plug and shout out for our team chairs. It is going to be a lot of work in the sense of right now we are able to create an IEP from our old IEP. So we're able to copy all the information in all the sections when we move into an annual review or a reevaluation. When we have an initial, we build it from the start. When we move to the new version, we will not be able to do that. So Power School special programs won't be able to, I wish there was some algorithm to do this, but they can't. They can't make the connections like, oh, that piece is now here and make it feed into there. That's just not going to happen. So when we do move over, some of that extra documentation work that our system is set up for us to avoid will have to be in place for this first IEP. Moving forward beyond that, they will be able to kind of copy and put it into that new version. But because we're going from one version to another, we don't have that capacity. So if everyone has a team chair and wants to, thank them and high five them next year, they might need a little bit more encouragement over the next year.
Liz?
I just wondered, you talked a lot about the form and the structural changes and things like that. How will this change the implementation, the application of the IEP?
So there are a couple bigger things that I'd love for you all to know about. One piece to the new IEP is the way the form is written. It really does elicit more student voice in their IEP and in the IEP process. So, for example, right now, the vision statement on the IEP says, what does the team want the student to accomplish over the next year to 5 years? Right now, in the new version, it says, by the time I finish elementary school, I want to, and then it leaves it blank for a fill-in. So it's written that way on purpose, so that we're really eliciting some real student voice in that IEP. And then, the next couple of questions down the bottom, it says, based on the student's vision, what does the rest of the team, want to focus on over the next year? So it really is pulling, like, what does this student want to be? What is their goals? And how are we working that IEP to fit that? So I think that that's going to be an interesting component over the next year. We have talked as a team chair group, is that every student's voice will be in an IEP meeting, whether they're attending for the duration of the IEP meeting, or they meet with their special education liaison before, or some students might create a PowerPoint or record themselves or write something that they want, depending on the student's needs. Some of our students that maybe have AAC needs can develop different ways to participate in their IEP meeting and have a presence and a voice in that meeting. So that is going to be the one thing I think in practice that might be a shift for parents. I think it's been really, at age 14, legally our kids should be participating in those team meetings in some way. And I think right now it's a little bit more choice on the parents' part, and I think that might be a shift because we need that student's voice. Whether they sit in through an hour, some of the meetings aren't too long, and I know that, whether they sit through an hour or 2 hours of a meeting, or they're there, for 20 minutes, really want to talk about their focus and move back to their classrooms, it would be really student-driven on what their participation would be. But that will be a shift in practice. The other piece in practice that I think will make a difference is the way the accommodations and modifications are laid out. I think it's going to significantly help our parents better see what the accommodations are, and also our teaching staff better see what the listed accommodations are. And when I say that is shifting, it right now, and for those of you who have read or seen an IEP, our accommodations are listed in a big, long list, right? So if you're thinking about maybe a general education teacher at our Grafton High School, right, that maybe sees during their school day 150 kids, maybe, right? They would have to know that big, long list of things for every kid that has special education needs. And that's a challenge. So we want to, the new IEP definitely makes it more clear, more concise. It outlines the difference between accommodations that are going to happen during instructional times, accommodations that are going to happen during unstructured times like recess, lunch, flex block, whatever those are, accommodations that are going to happen during extracurriculars, and then accommodations that might happen during the community or workplace for our older population of students. So that might be our high school students that have internships, or our high school students that might be going out into the community. What are the accommodations they need in that setting? So the fact that it's breaking it down much more, I think is going to help our staff. Our general education teachers that are teaching ELA can really focus on that academics block of accommodations and modifications. So I do think that's the other piece in practice in a positive way, that's going to affect how we do things and how we make sure we're communicating with our staff.
Nicole, can I just piggyback on that? So that piece about the extracurriculars, that was
Yes.
actually my question. How, and I know this is a messy question, but how is that being communicated to, let's say, our coaches or our directors or people that may not be in Grafton schools but come in? Are they able to have access? Will they be able to have access to that piece to really be able to make sure that the students get what they need in those extracurriculars?
Yeah, they should. I'm saying it that way.
Yeah,
They should have access. I think the distinction is there's also confidentiality pieces to it, right? So
Right, that's why I
if
said
they
messy.
don't need accommodations during extracurriculars, they wouldn't be provided, a student's 504 accommodations or, the IEP accommodations, because it's not relevant, right? But we might have students, that have maybe paraprofessional support and do need a paraprofessional to assist them during extracurriculars. That paraprofessional would have access and kind of be the lead to work with the coach on what are the things we need to implement. If there were other things, and offhand, I can't necessarily think of anything in our current IEPs that would relate automatically to like an athletics or an extracurricular in that nature. Much of our accommodations are focused in on the academic component of things. I think the paraprofessional is probably the biggest one, or students, I would say more specifically, some of our students on the autism spectrum, and that's their identified disability. They may need some additional things to help support them during an extracurricular, and that is something that we would provide the coach. Or if it's, and I say that, if it's Grafton Public Schools run.
Yeah, of course.
Right. So it wouldn't be something we would share,
Yeah, with Grafton Rec. Yeah, no,
or willy-nilly with anybody, that is just kind of hanging out with the kids, yeah.
that was exactly what I wanted to know. Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Liz?
I just wondered, you talked a lot about conferences and training and so much information, so many things that it sounds like your team is bringing back and trying to put into practice. It made me wonder if you ever run into any barriers, funding or otherwise, to being able to use any of those things that you learned that you'd like to see put in practice in the school.
I don't think so. I mean, sometimes, depending on, if there's a training and there's a some new intervention that has like a prescribed amount of time, that can sometimes be a barrier in a student's schedule. And we say this all the time, like we have students for about 6 hours a day in which we have to squeeze a lot into that 6 hours. So sometimes there's that schedule piece. If they're, we've shifted some of our Wilson programming, 45 minutes is kind of the prescribed amount that is considered, 45 minutes a day, that's considered a solid use of like Wilson reading. So over the course of the last couple years, and I know Bob really spearheaded this more than me, but we shifted. A lot of our service delivery was at 30 minutes for Wilson, and we started moving that slowly to the 45 minutes. So sometimes that can be a barrier in some newfound thing that folks want to do. But I would say that funding has never been a barrier in something someone wants to try or bring back to the group. I think it's usually just like the systems of a school that sometimes can make it a little harder for folks to implement. I will say when we have those situations, or when we have that work with mine and Chris's work with the principals on like, how can we make this happen? How do we squeeze this into what we're trying to do? All of our principals are super open to us and hashing through some of those things, because of course they're scheduling for all the students in their building, not just the one student that probably needs this intervention. So we have to kind of work with them on how do we make this happen. And I will say, I can't think of a time where I've ever had to go back to a family or a service provider and say like, we really can't do that. There just hasn't been, which I think we're lucky, because that is not something I think that is pretty common in all school districts, but we make it work.
Anything else?
I just had a quick comment / question. Our student council is involved in Special Olympics Massachusetts events, such as like the bocce you mentioned. There's a 3-day tournament hosted every year, and we were considering putting our name out to host for this year. So I was wondering if we would have your support within that. It might take, and we do have to do the facilities request.
Yep.
But it's great. Schools from all across the state come, and
Amazing.
a bunch of students can help the athletes, and it's a really great program. So.
That's awesome. Yes, absolutely. Let me know what you
I
need
will.
to make that happen, and we'll make it happen.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Love that.
Well, Nicole, thank you so much for coming. Please send our best
you.
wishes to Chris and his family, and thank him for all his hard work and your staff and team. This is amazing, and, you know,
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll be excited to hear in the fall once everything's rolled out, and keep up the good work, and let us know if you need anything.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
for
Nicole.
coming. Nice to see you.
That was you, right?
Thank you.
I didn't even know. I would have liked him to come, but it's a little late.
Basically been begging him to,
Yeah,
like,
I really need a. Oh, all right. Did you want to introduce? or
Sure,
you want me
it's
to? Yeah.
my pleasure to introduce Patrick Collins to the committee. Pat is the former Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations in Shrewsbury, widely regarded as a financial genius and all-around great guy. That's at least Kathleen and I couldn't be bigger fans. We were thrilled that Pat was willing to provide mentorship for Kathleen in her first year. That's been invaluable. And Pat was also willing, as we discussed at previous meetings, he's willing to help us create a five-year forecast, financial forecast for the schools that will be married with the town forecast that Evan came and talked to the committee about earlier in the year. And tonight, Pat was generous enough to come in and give us an overview of that five-year forecast. So thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Pat. That's fantastic. So, thank you for coming. You can kick it off and.
Very good.
Pause
Thank
for
you both.
questions if you want, whatever you want to do.
Sure, no, thank you both, and thanks for that introduction, I appreciate that. And, you know, there are a number of slides, it's like 35 slides, so however you want to operate, you know, in terms of asking questions and, you know, intermittently or waiting to the end, I'm flexible, however you
Yeah,
want.
I think we
would like
should
to
do it
that.
intermittently, just because it's finance
a
and
lot.
it's a lot. So and then if you're covering it in a few slides, you can say, well,
Sure,
however you want to.
okay, absolutely.
And I'll just if you guys want to just politely raise and go, that's great. You don't have to wait for me to call on you for this.
All right, well, again, thanks for having me, and appreciate the introduction. I just wanted I put this slide in here, not knowing how we were going to begin, but I just wanted to make sure, not only for the school committee, but also for any community members that might be watching that, that the information that I'm providing is based upon my own industry experience. I'm not some guy off the street that doesn't have any public school industry experience. And so that's why I put that information in there for you, just to have you know where I'm coming from. So the process, I just want to talk a little bit about the budget forecasting process. Obviously, I'm here to provide an outside and independent, objective look at the next 5 years for your school department budget. You know, looked at some of the recent budget history trend. That can be one litmus test or indicator in terms of looking forward. But also, more importantly, to look forward and using a set of agreed-upon assumptions. So during this process, I did have to consult with Dr. Cummings and Mrs. Lungarini about some of what those assumptions might be. I can't make them up for you, so I had to have some input in that regard. And I think it's assumed, you know, Grafton Schools is a high-quality school district on a lot of different measures, and so, you know, the thinking behind here implicitly is thinking that you want to maintain that high quality going forward and have the appropriate amount of resources to do so. And so this tool that, in some of the slides that I'm showing you are just kind of outcomes of a tool that I provided to the school administration that can be used actually every year if you want to update your you know, do your own internal 5-year budget forecast, you could use that as well. So that's been provided as well. So in terms of topics, I just wanted to start looking at some spending benchmark data, kind of see where Grafton is in relation to other school districts in Massachusetts. Looking at your fiscal 25-year budget allocations, where the dollars those big places where dollars are invested. Again, looking at agreed-upon assumptions. Of course, the key driver is going to be your school department enrollment. We're expecting some big increases or decreases or level. That's going to drive the forecast. And I want to talk a little bit about resources for district improvement plan or your strategic plan. Every school district's required in Massachusetts to have a district improvement plan. It's not as if we can, rest on our laurels and be status quo. And so in order to have improvement, you typically are going to need some new set of resources or reconfigure the resources you have in order to implement that improvement plan. So that's a key element going forward in terms of your setting aside the right amount of dollars for the next 5 years to implement whatever strategic plan goals that you have. Then I'm going to kind of go through the model itself, the numbers, and talk a little bit about other funding sources, and then just some closing comments. So in terms of the benchmark data, I know that you're likely familiar with this, that that kind of, I guess it looks a red line on the top there. That's the state average per pupil expenditure. And the lower line in blue is Grafton Public Schools for this past 6-year period. Of course, you've been consistently below the state average for a long time. For fiscal '23, on a per pupil basis, you were over $4,500 less than the state average per pupil in terms of spending, or 21% below. So again, this is, in terms of developing a budget forecast, somebody from the outside is looking at this saying like, okay, do they have, are they spending way over above state average, and maybe there's some way to reconfigure resources and be a little bit more modest going forward? That's not the case from my perspective. You're significantly below state average. State averages incorporate all school districts. Not all school districts are alike. You got vocational school districts, you got regional school districts, you got big school districts, you got small school districts. So the Department of Education has developed a tool called the District Analysis Review Tool. And they select, meaning the Department of Education, Mass Department of Education, selects like school districts to compare. And they provide all sorts of information available on their website publicly, including spending information. So I looked at Grafton's peers in terms of how the Department of Education looks at Grafton in terms of peer districts, and you can see Holliston, Chelmsford, Marshfield, Milton, Pembroke, Neshoba, Wakefield. Now, these districts all have the same grade span, meaning pre-K through 12, and are relatively about the same size. So it kind of accounts for some of those scale differences you might see when you're looking at just the big aggregate state average, right? So in this cohort, you can see that still Grafton is the lowest in terms of spending per pupil at just over $16,500. This is the fiscal '23 data. So again, it's not as if, from my perspective, Grafton has any kind of school spending problem, if you will. It's very modest. The other way that I wanted to just look at this is, what the past 6 years, has there been any movement, if you will, in terms of Grafton getting closer to the state average, or has that difference been maintained? And so this bar that is blue and red on the screen here represents for fiscal '18 the total state average spending, and then the 77.5% is what Grafton spent, meaning your average per pupil was 77.5% of the state average in fiscal '18. So that was 6 years ago. What's happened over time? Well, there's been a 1 percentage point difference to the positive, but it's been really kind of flat. You're not gaining any ground, if you will, in terms of the state average. You're kind of maintaining status quo. So that was the kind of spending data look, shifting gears a little bit to where the money's allocated using the fiscal '25 proposed budget. And this is not unlike other municipal school districts, in that the vast majority of resources goes towards salaries and wages. School departments are personnel-intensive organizations. You know, we're all about the people, providing the services. And then your next biggest cost is transportation, and then out-of-district tuition for special needs students. You know, right there, that's 92% of your spending plan. And so all those other things, you know, technology, copy paper, athletic program, extracurriculars, all those things, utilities, and the supplies and materials are just all together just 8% of your budget. And again, that's not really different than other municipal school districts. That's pretty typical look. So when you're looking at forecasting, you can see where the biggest impacts are going to be the next 5 years, right? And so it's, you know, in your staffing, transportation, and special education are the top three. So moving on to assumptions. In consultation with Dr. Cummings and Mrs. Lungarini, I understand that this year marks the last year for your 4 collective bargaining agreements with your 4 unions. So it's not as if that I had information about, say, the next 3 years and had very certain information. We had to make some assumptions along the way. And so the assumptions that were made were what I would characterize as usual and customary, meaning kind of looking at how collective bargaining agreements been settled in terms of COLAs in the past and using those same COLAs going forward. And then also, again, very typical for school department labor agreements for teachers, paraprofessionals, clerical workers, your custodians. All these folks typically are on a step schedule. And so I took a look at where people, each of those groups were in terms of where they laid out in terms of that step schedule. Do you have a lot of people at the tops of the step, meaning there won't be a step increase, there'll just be a COLA increase going forward? Or do you have a lot of people making steps, because that's going to add some additional costs? So that's kind of the level of detail that was brought to this forecast for salaries and wages. In terms of transportation, of course, you know, you're going into the last year of a 5-year contract, and you know, I know Mrs. Lungarini is going to bid this service as she has to. It's a subject to public procurement, so that will go out in the wintertime. Again, I don't have specific factors to use. It's not as if your next 5 years are certain. I had to make some assumptions, and we had some conversation about that. And also, we had a telephone call with the owner of AA Transportation, your current service provider, to kind of get some industry insight from him as well, and use that information in terms of building this forecast. Special education out-of-district tuition, you know, the rates, again, this is not something that you have, in terms of the rates, you have like no control over. That's the Mass Department of Operational Services Division. They're the ones that set the rates for all the Massachusetts approved private schools. And, you know, they'll publish the rate, you know, in the fall for the upcoming school year, upcoming fiscal year. So we had to use some assumption based upon kind of recent history about what those rates might be going forward for the next 5 years. And then the same thing with this smaller category of expenses for supplies, technology, contract services. Again, that's just 8% of your budget, but kind of using inflationary factors based upon the type of category of expense that it was. So that's how the assumptions went for those services. And then with respect to strategic planning and your district improvement plan, I have built into this forecast 0.5% for each of the years going forward to be put towards achieving your strategic goals or your district improvement plan. And, you know, again, I've provided a tool if, you know, the school committee felt like, you know, going forward that you wanted to put more money into that, then, you know, you could actually regenerate a new forecast fairly quickly and see what results that provided you. But I assume the 0.5%, which again is a modest sum going forward for improvement. Okay, moving on to enrollment. You know, again, I looked back at 10 years, just looking at from the Department of Education statistics in terms of Grafton Public Schools. In the fall of 2013, you were at 2994. This past fall, you were at 3,050. And so, you know, that's relatively flat enrollment, and I understand you had a recent NESDEC report that was kind of looking forward that looked at fairly steady enrollment. So I assumed level enrollment going forward, meaning that there weren't going to be any big variations in terms of increases that might cause you to add teachers or paraprofessionals or buses, or that there wouldn't be any big decreases, and that you'd be pulling back staff. And in fact, you know, if you had either occurrence, if you know, added 75 kids or lost 75 kids, it's likely to have absolutely no impact on this forecast, because, you know, as you all know, it's kind of this notion of kind of like the marginal cost of, you know, educating one more kid. You know, a new kid can enroll tomorrow, right? And so the average, some people might say, well, the average cost is $16,000. Don't you need another $16,000? Well, we really don't, right? I mean, there's room in the class, there's room on the bus, we got some books on the shelf. So the additional cost to educate one more student is zero. So, you know, if you were to add, say, 50 kids across 12 grades, you could probably easily fit those kids in at no additional cost. And the inverse would be true as well if you lost 50 kids. So the only thing that's going to, you know, impact that potentially is if you had some sort of grade cluster where we had a lot of kids move in one particular grade. And, you know, my understanding of your school district is that you have, you know, about 125 plus or minus school choice kids. So you're actually able to manage your enrollment because you have a waiting list for school choice to a certain degree. So, you know, that's actually a pretty nice place to be able to, and to have kind of some positive control over that in terms of your overall enrollment. So beyond just overall enrollment, you know, I think it's important to, I wanted to just dig a little bit deeper than just head count, because, you know, we all know that educating children with certain types of needs costs more to educate per child. And so I looked back 10 years and then compared that to the present in terms of various populations that are measured by the Department of Education for all school districts every year. And this is what this comparison shows, that back in 2013, your first language not English population was 2.6% of your overall school population. And, excuse me, it's almost doubled presently, so you're up to 5.1. So it's a 2.5 percentage point difference, but it's a 96% increase, right? So this is an important thing to kind of make sure, especially other people, you know, when you're asking for additional funding, whether it be at town meeting or in the future for an operational override, that these so-called subgroup populations are growing in Grafton, and they do cost more to educate. And that's implicit in the state funding formula. The Chapter 70 funding formula accounts for all these differences. They provide more funding based upon these types of student profiles and demographics. So, you know, your English language learner population, again, I'm sure it's, in terms of numbers, it's not a big overall number, but, you know, you've had a big percentage increase, 317% difference in 10 years. Your low-income population has increased, as has your students with disabilities over that time span. And so this high needs, the bottom part, basically a high needs student is any student who falls into one or more of these categories. And so what this tells you is that back in 2013, about 24% of your overall population was considered high needs, whereas 10 years later, right now, you're about 32%. So that's a 33% increase. And so that's just something to be mindful of, that, while your overall enrollment might be steady, right? The point being, if your overall enrollment is steady, but these subgroup populations are increasing, then the cost to educate is going to increase incrementally. And that has to be factored into your forecasting going forward. I also just want to make the point that while there have been increases in these student demographic groups, you're still below the state average in a lot of different ways. And so, the state average is on the far right here. Your English language learner population at 2.5%, the state's at 13% overall. Students with disabilities, your presentation you just had, you're still below state average in terms of students identified with disabilities. So it's not as if you're out of the norm in Grafton. It's just that those populations have grown over the past 10 years. Okay.
Do you want to pause? Any questions from what you just heard?
I just wanted to point out, going back one slide, that even though all of those numbers have increased, it is still not enough to qualify for a significant increase from the state. The formula is not giving us the jump that we would need to accommodate those additional populations. And it's something that I personally have advocated for over the years, and there doesn't seem to be any desire to do anything about it until 2026.
Right.
Like that's some magical year that's suddenly gonna fix everything. And so I just wanted to point that out for people who are watching at home, that, these numbers look scary big, but they're not big enough for the state to take any action for us. We remain a minimally funded district. If these numbers tripled, we probably still wouldn't get
Right.
much
Yeah.
more money.
Yeah, you're a so-called minimum aid district, so you're going to get,
Yep.
$30
Yep.
per student per year.
Oh, maybe 100 this year, maybe.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Megan, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I had a question about the high needs category. Is that the percentage of the students who have some sort of need, or is that the percentage of all students?
So what this means is that a high-need student is a kid who falls into one or more. So, for example, you could have a student who is an English language learner and low income, but they're really only counted once in terms of that percentage on the bottom of that 31.9%. So they're not counted twice. And so there could be, a student with disabilities could be, they're not a low-income student, they're not an English language learner, they're just students with disability.
So, my question was, is that number out of all of the students, so are 33% high needs are 33% of students high needs, or is it students with some sort of need, high needs?
So what this says, if I'm answering your question right, and if I'm not, please let me know. What this basically says is that 32% or 31.9% of the overall population, you have about 3,000 kids in Grafton, about 32% of them fall into one of these categories.
So when you went back to where it showed the state, if I'm interpreting that correctly, most students enrolled in the state are high needs?
Most meaning 56%,
Yeah.
more than half, sure.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
exactly. You got it. Very good.
Thank you, Pat. I think you
Yep.
can go on. Thanks.
Okay, on to the numbers. I know this is tedious, there's a lot of numbers. I'm not gonna read through all these. It's gonna, make people's head spins. But basically, what I wanted to do was to develop the forecast using Grafton's salary budget categories. There's a lot of ways that you could do this and have big summaries or just put all salaries together, but what I wanted to do was just use the categories that you have so that you're familiar with that. And that's the way that it's broken out. This first slide, this first chart is really just all salaries, and then the second part is all your operations and maintenance and non-salary expenses. I just wanted to call your attention to these columns in yellow, because my understanding is that, you know, your budget for fiscal '25, excuse me, is just over $45 million on the left here. And that number was derived, that's a number that you're gonna take to town meeting and ask them to approve and appropriate. But that in addition to that, you need about another 1.4 million that you're gonna use one-time monies from revolving funds in order to maintain all of the programs and services and staff that you have. And you're gonna be spending down significantly your revolving funds. And you can only do that once. So in order to devise the forecast going forward, you know, you just wanna make sure that you're accounting for that, because the presumption is you're gonna wanna keep all your services going forward for the next 5 years. So I added back into each of these categories the revolving fund dollars that you're spending this year one time, because you really need to shift those to the general fund for fiscal '26. So that's what those numbers mean. So $752,532 are funds coming from revolving funds that are funding teachers that can only be spent for fiscal '25, because there won't be funding left in those revolving funds. So you need to shift it, and I called that the fiscal '25 baseline required. And then I built the 5-year forecast, fiscal '26 going forward off of fiscal '25 baseline required. In terms of the percentages, this is just a percentage look at it, so you can see all these various categories. Again, this accounts for an assumed COLA and step increases. And I guess what I would do, just as to point something out, is, for example, if you were to look at paraprofessionals, which is the second row, and it says 4.7% needed for each of the next 5 years. And then you compare that with custodians, excuse me, 3.9%. And part of the reason for that difference, the reason for that difference is that your custodian population is much smaller, and most of those folks are at top step. Whereas you have a larger population of paraprofessionals, but many of them are still, in the next several years, going to be making steps in addition to a COLA. That's why you need a higher percentage for that particular subgroup going forward. So I just kind of want to call out that difference. You know, substitutes, district substitutes, I know it's not a big dollar amount, but, you know, I just put basically every other year, you know, if you increase your rate, you're paying about $100 or so. If you increase it by $5 a day or something, you know, you're gonna have to periodically increase that to remain competitive with other communities and keep getting substitutes. You know, whether it's 5% every other year, or you do something, you know, smaller every year. So that's really the salary piece. And then non-salary piece, just use some inflationary factors of the 3.7%. Special education, of course, is going to be higher. That's been higher recently with some of the increases approved by Mass Operational Services Division. Technology tends to be higher just because of the needs for basic cybersecurity and other factors that surround the technology world. And then utilities typically are trending higher, so we have that at 7%. And then finally, transportation. It's probably better that I'm the bearer of bad news than anybody else, because I get to walk out of here, you know. But, you know, fiscal '26, you're gonna, when you go out to bid for a new contract, you're gonna see a big increase for fiscal '26. Probably a double digit, low double digit and then, high to mid-single digits thereafter. That's just the transportation industry. And it's not Grafton specific. It's really just what's happening out there. So, again, this recap sheet is really, this is percentages, and the bottom line, you need to add back from the one-time funds is just under 1.3 million to get your new fiscal '25 baseline to carry that forward. These next couple slides are just those percentages applied to the new baseline required for each year. So let me just kind of flash forward here. The bottom half of this slide, you can see that just no improvement, no new investments, no district improvement, plan, strategic goals, investments. I would estimate that for fiscal '26, you need a 7.6% increase. '27, you need a 4.5%, and then each year thereafter, 4.4%. But equally important, you need to add in some dollars for your district improvement planning, reaching your strategic goals. Again, that's the 0.5%. Comes out to just under $250,000 early on. It just goes over that later in the forecast. And so the net that I would forecast that you would need for fiscal '26 is just over 8%, 8.1, then a 5, and then 4.9, 4.9, 4.9. Again, I want to point out fiscal '26, why is it 8%? Because you need to account for those one-time dollars that you're spending out of revolving funds, and you also have, a larger transportation increase. Those are kind of the two big reasons why fiscal '26 is different than the other succeeding years.
Yeah.
Yes?
Just to clarify, this is just for level services, so no investments, no additions.
So this slide, up the top would be no additional investments. If you add the 0.5% or $231,000, of course, that's not specific to any, you could, if you wanted to, part of your strategic plan is to add more ELL or special education teachers or something like that, that could be part of that.
Right.
It could be new literacy resources.
Right.
It could be whatever the school committee decides that it would be, and then that would bring it to those lower numbers.
I had a quick clarification. Is it my turn? This is just operational, correct? This does not include capital investments.
Correct. Absolutely.
That's what I thought.
Thanks, Pat.
Okay. Just a few other pieces of information. So I just wanted to just do a simple chart. I know that the town administrator had done a preliminary estimate or an initial estimate that he had plugged 3.7%. I think it's really great that he asked you and invited you to provide him a forecast. And so I just wanted to simply lay out, what the forecast I did is in comparison to his. And he had, he started with 25 and ended at 29. I started at 26 and ended at 30. I just presumed 25 was kind of a done deal. But those are the differences there. Of course, it's higher than the town administrator's preliminary estimate in each of those years. And then, converting his preliminary estimate to dollars and taking the dollars that I presented to you, you can see it's higher, of course, in every year. And I think so for fiscal '26, it's $2 million higher, 2.4 in fiscal '27. And it just kind of gets larger from there going forward. Again, in context with recent history, looking forward, it doesn't look that different, other than the 8.1% I mean, you had a 5 and a 5-4, and then some 3 7s. You know, this is an 8-1, and, you know, some 4 9s. So it's, again, kind of that fiscal '26 is the big pent-up demand year, if you will, from shifting dollars from revolving funds. And then, again, just kind of in context of what the administrator's initial estimate was, looking at the various municipal departments in the school department. He had the schools at 7. So if you're at 4 9s, for example, you know, that puts you in the upper median, if you will, just above public works, but below public safety and unclassified. You know, at using 4.9% instead of 3.7%. And then, you know, I wanted to take a look at information, again, for context, because I think context provides a lot of context and information. And so I looked at the Department of Revenue, the Division of Local Services. Again, this is all publicly available information. And this is a recap of so-called Schedule A, which is general fund spending from the town of Grafton for the past 20 years. And in the 6th column from the left, education, that's your school department resources, money spent from the general fund on education, and then you can see all the other categories. And so what I did is I just basically looked at, I calculated in the yellow the percentages. So what was education back in 2003, 20 years ago, before these young ladies were born, the education percent of spending was 60%, and municipal spending was 40%. And for fiscal '23, the most recently completed year, it's nearly identical. And so I just thought that that was important information. You know, and frankly, having worked in the school department for a long time, sometimes there's this notion, if you will, that the school department keeps consuming the resources or more resources than maybe some other departments. And sometimes that might be true based upon the community. That's not the case here based upon the information that was provided to the Department of Revenue from your town accountant's office. Okay, other funding sources, I'm wrapping up. No fear, I'm wrapping up.
This is fast, this is great.
Oh, yeah, this is super helpful. Yeah.
Sure. So you know, your other funding sources, just like other school departments, receive federal and state grants, circuit breaker reimbursement, school choice revenue. You have, I won't say unique, but you have a significant population that you're relying on. And then you have some other miscellaneous receipts. You know, I basically looked at those as being relatively flat going forward in that they would not provide relief to you on your general fund. I mean, we know that federal and state grants, you know, the COVID dollars aside, that's behind us now, that federal and state grant dollars are pretty static. You know, the big variable for you might be the school choice revenue, but everything else is going to be, you know, pretty static. So there's no rescue, if you will, from those funding sources. Just a little bit more on the school choice revenue is that, you know, obviously the population has grown and therefore the dollars has grown, although, you know, in the last 4 years, it's kind of evened out a little bit, leveled off between 770, 822. So it was during a growth period, but the past 4 years has been, you know, relatively flat, and so I assumed it kind of being at the same. It's not going to be a big rescue going forward. And, you know, I would say that, again, going back to the fact that you have a waiting list means that you have strong demand, means that people from surrounding communities view Grafton as a high-quality school district, and more advantageous than parents and children perceived that their home school district is, wherever they're coming from. And so, just one anecdote that I do want to share from my time in Shrewsbury is that we had our fair share of financial struggles. And during the time period when charter schools were growing, the Advanced Math and Science Academy opened up in Marlborough. And despite the charter where they were supposed to kind of more substantially service students from Marlborough and Hudson, they were taking students from all over Central Mass. And at the time in Shrewsbury, we were struggling for funding, and so, especially at our elementary grades, our middle school grades, our class sizes were increasing. And so we were at high 20s, 28s, 30s. We had to cut back on some programs. We had to cut back on some reading teachers, media specialists. And so there was, if you think of like a bell-shaped curve, those next 5 years, the amount of students that enrolled in AMSA Charter School from Shrewsbury schools ballooned to like over 130 students, primarily from middle school grades, because the parents perceived that that education would be more advantageous for their child, lower class sizes, higher quality, and than they would get in Shrewsbury schools. And so the effect that it had was that, you know, if you're not in tune with school finance, you might think, hey, who cares? You know, you could probably lower your budget, right? Nope. You have to pay for those charter school kids. And so that comes off the cherry sheet, and, you know, the town, it was a spin down, if you will. You know, we're struggling for financing, and then each succeeding year, we were sending more money to AMSA Charter School because of increased enrollment. And it's nothing against AMSA Charter School whatsoever, or any charter school. I'm just pointing out the fact that you really need to, I think, preserve what you have here in terms of quality to maintain that school choice demand that you have. And the opposite could be true as well, that if Grafton parents believe that, you know, the quality is diminished, then they're going to send more of their students. The red bar is students school choicing out. Now, most of yours, like, are virtual school students as opposed to other communities, but that can happen as well, because parents have choices, right? Students have choices. So just kind of a cautionary tale, if you will, based upon my own experience that wasn't so great to remember. Chapter 78, we talked a little bit about your minimum aid community. It's really not likely to change. You know, the statute calls for $30 per student, meaning, you know, if you have 3,000 kids, it's about $90,000, you know, new money every year. So this is the forecast on that particular aid. We know that the House Ways and Means Committee budget came out, and they're using $104 per student, which is great. See if it sticks, because now the Senate, you know, they'll release their budget in early May, so we'll see if that actually sticks. But anyway, that was just the forecast at the $30, and making sure that people understood that particular piece. And yeah, they're really not likely to rejigger Chapter 70 again, because they did it with the Student Opportunity Act. You know, they got in there with the mechanics and they churned it all around like they do every 7 to 10 years, and so I think they're going to let it lie probably till fiscal 26, 27. You know, again, got a high-quality school district, and I made that presumption going forward, and that's what is behind these numbers. And again, you have a tool. This doesn't have to be a static forecast. I think it's a realistic and reasonable one. But if for some reason the school committee felt like the school administration, you know, wanted to tweak it, you have a tool that you can use to update in each succeeding year. So that's all I got. happy to
That's
answer any
it.
other questions you might have.
Thank you, Pat. I think, I'll just kick it off. I don't have questions yet, but just, this is amazing. Also, though, I hope this isn't a shock to anybody up here because it pretty much echoes what, Jay and Kathleen have been presenting all along, which I think is great because sometimes, not in this room, but sometimes when you go out in the public, having a consultant say exactly what you've been saying all along, people seem to like that. So I really appreciate this. You also broke it down in a way that's very easy to explain and understand. And I thank you so much for your service. I'll open it up for, questions if we have any.
So comprehensive.
It's very comprehensive. Liz?
Not a question, but nothing shocked me, no. The only thing, it was just nice to see in a concrete way the fiscal year '26 change and what we're doing because we have to draw from those revolving funds and where that puts us in such a difficult position in the next fiscal year. And to see that in that 8% number, I mean, we get 3, we'd love to get 4% increase. But to see 8, that just seems like, to see that on paper is really something and helpful.
Yeah, I understand it's kind of hard news, hard news for you and hard news for the community, but it's also, I would say, it's better to have hard news early that you
Yes.
can, plan for and react to as opposed to, last minute or surprises, so, yeah.
Anybody else? And for me, my plan is to send, when I get home, I'll send this out to the select board. I know you'll send it to Evan, but, we'll do some clipping of this. I mean, this is just such a great presentation. I'd love to get it to a wider audience, because I think in this room, we probably understand municipal finance as much as anybody in the town, so this is just phenomenal work. Anybody else?
Can I make a
Yeah, of
suggestion?
course.
When you send it to the select board, can you also send it to the finance committee?
Sure, of course, yeah.
Some of them are probably watching. Hi.
I'm sure they
But I think they should see it.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And when we get it, we'll send it.
Only half an hour of your time.
Yeah, and thank you for all your
very
work.
much.
I know you've been doing a lot in the
Thank you, it's been a real
district
pleasure to
Very
work with Dr. Cummings, Mrs. Longarini, and happy to be here to present this information to you and wishing you the best going forward.
Thanks, well,
Thank
we might
you.
be calling on you next year for some extra,
If you have any advice.
for some house parties.
All right, sounds good.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Appreciate it.
Have a great night. Thanks for coming. All right, let's see, 8:36, yeah, I gotcha. We're gonna do, Dr. Cummings is gonna do his evaluation, that's our next thing, but I'd love, for you guys to give your report and we can get you out of here if you'd like.
Some of it doesn't have much detail yet. You guys can start off because my stuff's more than that. You can start.
Okay, so we have prom May 4th. We have NHS Senior Night May 8th.
FCL on next Friday is volunteering at Cradles to Crayons, so we're all going, or I think it's 20 people. We're all going, and we're volunteering there for the entire day.
Great. It's a great organization.
Yeah.
They do
And
great
then
work.
May 2nd is the College and Career Fair in Boston, so we have some students going to that.
And then on May 1st, we have our student council is hosting a blood drive. And I think it's with Mass General, but I'm not 100% sure. But it's for teachers and students during school. And then it's the mobile blood drive, so they'll park out front, and then students can come down from class. And then on May 10th, we're hosting a movie night for elementary school students at Millbury Street Elementary School. The movie is Despicable Me, for anyone interested. There is a charge at the door, but all the fundraising goes back into our student council to keep hosting events such as this. And then on May 22nd are the athletic awards. So each team tends to show up and get awards. Athletes are invited to dress up, and coaches will be there.
And then we have the English field trip tomorrow for juniors and some seniors. So that's to New York, which is pretty exciting.
And what are you going to see?
Oh, it's Gatsby.
And who's starring in it?
I don't know.
Great Jeremy
Jordan.
Say the
of Newsies fame.
And then post AP exams are excused absences now, which is a shout out to student advisory for that, because I don't know, that's something that people have been annoyed about for a while, but this is awesome, a big accomplishment.
There's a band trip to Florida coming up. You want to do that? Oh, yeah. I mentioned at the last meeting we had a Cancun's fundraiser, and it was pretty successful. I think we had a lot of community members come out, and I think we ended up raising around $750 for our class. And then the last thing we had is that senior internships started a few weeks ago. So for the next bit of school until graduation, those seniors will report to their internship instead. So people do it. I know a girl who said she was doing one at a tattoo parlor. So, and she's super into art. So it's a really good opportunity. And
Visa, this is you'll be here our next meeting. It's May 7th, and that's your last meeting, I think.
Couple more weeks.
Wow. All right, well, thank you all. That was a great night. Be careful getting to your car if you're participating in any senior activity.
What's happening? I don't know.
Okay,
What is it, a sense?
yeah, ready for you.
All right.
You know, my transitions are always a little awkward. That's fine. Next up.
Helps lighten things.
Thank you. We will have Dr. Cummings, and he's going to give us just a quick summary, because our next meeting, we're going to have our evaluation, which we'll
Right.
just chat about
So I
after.
just put together just a few slides, very brief overview. I provided in your books my evaluation. I'll send that electronically tomorrow with the supporting documents as well. So as you're well aware, it's a 5-step process for superintendent evaluation. We are now moving into the summative evaluation that will be completed on May 7th. Then there's another self-assessment that typically takes place in the summer, where I look at goals, all that stuff, and we start the process again. DESI's starting, they kind of put it on the back burner, and it made some sense during COVID. They're definitely putting more effort into the superintendent evaluation process and evaluations across the board. I think what we're going to see next year is greater connection between the superintendent evaluation documents and the strategic plan or improvement plan of a district. You can see that they're trying to merge them now. So, makes sense, but that's to come. Basically, you have to have at least 2 goals. I have 4. We made those 2-year goals, and there are 4 standard areas, none shocking, that I'm evaluated on: instructional leadership, management, and operations, community and family engagement, and professional culture. And that's at the heart of it, that's the document that I gave you. And throughout the year, at least 2 or 3 times, I've given updates on formation of the goals, presentation of the goals, and then an update. So in my self-assessment, I rated myself as proficient in the 4 standard areas. There's exemplary, proficient, needs improvement, and unsatisfactory. In the 4 standard areas, and that's where the committee will rate me on, there are, I think it's 21 maybe, basically substandards, little pieces that I rated myself on in the self-evaluation, but it's not done in quite as granular a way with the committee members. So I had the occasional exemplary, I think I had 2 of those in the substandards, but rated myself as proficient. In terms of self-assessment, you'll see that I included information on well, before I jump into accomplishments, I really don't think there's a single thing, even traffic duty, that I do on my own. It's really any success that I've had, or any proficiency I've demonstrated, it's definitely a team effort. Mandy, central office, our entire staff. So I'm going to take credit for these things, but a lot of other people really deserve the credit. We've really just overhauled maintenance and operations. You've heard from Frank and Shauna. They're just doing a wonderful job with that. It's a night and day difference for us, and it makes a big impact. We've created that new professional development model. You heard a little bit about it tonight from Nicole, and we've presented on it before, but I think we're moving in a really exciting way in that sense. The work that we've been doing the past few years is kind of coming home to roost, if you will, in a very positive way around assessment and assessment data. There's still work to be done on it. We'd like to be able to carve out more time for that, but we've come a long way in the last couple of years in that area. You know that we have new math and literacy programs selected. They'll be implemented over the summer and next year and the following years. And a huge change for us at central office was obviously the shift to the director model. That's taken a great deal of time and effort, but I think we being the district are in a better place because of it. So I'm proud of all of those things. In terms of moving forward, I'll really focus more on this over the summer, but it's looking ahead. What can we do better? And there are a million things we can do better. Certainly, and Pat talked about it tonight, the strategic plan. How can we make that even stronger? I love that it's a living document. It's real, and it's however many pages. Let's say 10. It's not a binder of 50 pages that no one in their right mind would ever look at. We have been updating it. The last update was, we haven't presented it to the school committee, but just as we check things off, we don't just keep them on there. We just keep moving forward. So you'll hear a lot more about that. Obviously, next year, it's not really up to anybody in this room, but in terms of getting an override on the ballot and moving that forward, we play a role in that, but it's going to be a community-wide effort with numerous people and committees involved in that, but how we communicate our long-term budget needs, echoing what Patrick talked about tonight, is going to be critical. I touched on assessment data. It's figuring out how to create and carve out more time to do great things with that data. Connections, that was one of the goals of the 4 goals. I think we've certainly made progress in it, but I haven't spent as much time on it as I'd like to. And along the same lines, I'd say equity. We did the equity audit last year. We've got a small project going on, revisiting the audit results, taking place right now that we'll be reporting out on. So we're doing a lot of work with equity, but I'd like to take it to that next level. Nicole, I believe she talked about it tonight, and I've talked about it before. We've done a lot of work with special education and making sure that students with special needs are having, not just participating, but participating in meaningful ways that aren't necessarily check-the-box type of ways. And we're in the process, we're just wrapping up probably next week our visits to all of the schools to really dive into co-teaching and what that looks like, what we need to help better support that going forward. Next steps, either tonight or tomorrow, Lou Boudiette will reach out first to Laura, make sure we're all good to go with the Teach Point setup. You're familiar with it, but my guess is everybody's kind of forgotten, how it works. Once you get going, it's kind of like riding a bike, I think, but Lou's a tremendous support. She spent the last weekend, she worked on organizing everything. So it's ready to roll. She was waiting for me to present tonight. And then obviously the Teach Point process will take place individually. Those will go to Laura. She will summarize, and then my evaluation will be completed and presented on the 7th. And I think that's all I have. Yep.
Amy.
I have one question.
Yep.
One of your goals, maybe goal isn't the right word, forgive me, it's late and I'm tired. You had the 5% increase in literacy, 5% increase in math over 2 years.
Correct.
How does that get evaluated now?
So that, with the goals, they don't use it's like not numerically based now. It's, it goes from met to significant progress, some progress, no progress.
Okay,
I
okay,
forget if
thank
I put some, I would have put some or significant, probably some progress.
Okay,
They do a little bit better of a job with that. They used to say,
It was
you know,
just one that
aim
popped into my
high,
head
go,
'cause it
go for, you
it
know.
wasn't one you were gonna complete, so I was thinking about it at the back of
Yeah,
my mind.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That's important to remember that some of these were two-year goals.
Right.
Yeah, and they've moved away from the numerical piece, which was good, because they'd say kind of go for the gold, aim big, but you.
You get a 4.0.
You'd get kind of crushed for doing that. So it led to, I don't think we fell into the trap, but a lot of places, they would set a super low goal that they could do in a month and be, you know, woo-hoo, I got 100. So we definitely didn't do that.
Jay, I'm gonna be annoying, can we circle back to
Yep.
the equity? And I know that you touched on special ed. Equity, of course, you mean is for students of class difference or different
Yeah.
races, religion, all sorts of equity, not just.
100%.
Yeah.
And that, the audit that we did townwide was less geared towards special education, disabilities,
Right.
and more in that area. So we've got a project going on about that, but at the same time, we're focusing on students with disabilities and equity in that world. So I think we've got it covered.
Excellent, thank you. So I would ask, and I'm gonna be super generous, but I'm going to not build in any time for you to be late. So I would love it, May 5th, and I know that's a busy weekend, so if you know you have things going on that weekend, then get it to me on that Friday. I know, you have a busy week that, so you can do it as soon as Lou opens, you can do it early. But it's May 7th, so.
We'll have to do it this weekend.
Yeah, May 6th is, I'll use that data. Hopefully I could have morning of that 7th, or of the 5th, that'd be great. Yeah, I know you have, and I'm hoping to go that day.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too for you. But then May 6th is Day on the Hill, yeah,
Oh,
it's not that hard.
no.
And I'll make sure I sit with Rebecca too. She's the only one who hasn't done it before, so. But I think it's gotten so much easier, and Jay did a good job with all of his. If you see something that's missing, reach out to Jay in advance. Don't wait until the 7th and say we didn't have supporting documents, please.
Happy to give you whatever.
Yeah, I would just appreciate that. Yeah, thanks. And if you have questions though, and you just reach out to me as well. And yeah, you could do it tomorrow. I mean, that would be awesome.
I might.
You'll get a gold star, Amy.
No,
I know, you will. You will.
we need standards-based reporting.
Okay, I'll come up with that. Yeah. Awesome. All right, do you have a superintendent report?
Just have one thing. I wanted to follow up about NESDEC.
Yeah.
Pat talked about
Yeah.
enrollment, as you know, and you directed me to work with NESDEC to get a refreshed report on enrollment. We finished that work maybe the week before April break. The town planner department was super helpful. It all came together beautifully. There's definitely a lot going on in terms of building in Grafton, as you well know. I was surprised at how much when you put it all on a few pieces of paper. Anyhow, they drafted a report. I spoke with NESDEC leadership today, and they are going to have everything finalized, and it's almost done now, but finalized by tomorrow, so I will have that to you, and then I'll be able to present on it on the 7th.
Awesome. Great. I'm looking forward to that. That's it for superintendent
That's it.
report?
That's
All
all I
right,
had.
cool. We did student representative. Mandy, do you have anything for us tonight?
I feel like I don't have much that we're not already on the same page about. I missed last meeting because I attended the Blackstone Valley Job Fair, which I had actually been kind of forewarned that it wouldn't be well attended, but it actually was. It was well attended. A lot of soon-to-be college graduates, people who are in the area looking for kind of that entry-level teaching position. So it was really nice to connect with them. and to just kind of see what that event is all about. I think a lot of what Nicole and Pat talked about tonight, I was aiding in kind of the behind the scenes gathering of data and preparing a lot of that professional development that Nicole was talking about. And it's my first year in the role, but my understanding is we are headed into go time at this point, you know, prepping for summer program staffing and, believe it or not, the 24-25 year of staffing. So it's exciting.
That's great.
Yeah,
It's
a lot
it's
going
hard to
on.
believe this is only your first year in this
I know.
role. Feel like you've been knocking it out of the park, so
Uh-huh.
it's good.
Thank you.
All right, where are we? We are at future agenda schedule planning. So next meeting, we have Jay's evaluation. We'll get that NESDEC report.
This handbook.
The handbook,
Ooh, that's gonna be long.
and, yeah. And
What was the follow-up credit?
remember, we talked about, to that, making it more equitable that the, college.
Oh, that credit,
CP,
yeah.
So we just never took
Yeah.
a vote on it, cause we,
Oh, okay, yeah.
so we'll wanna take a vote on that.
Yep.
An athletics update still, you think?
I thought that's what you asked for.
I had asked
Yeah.
for it, I had asked
Yeah.
for it,
Yeah.
but
It's a
now
long
looking at it,
meeting.
I'm wondering if maybe we could move it.
Sure.
Because NESDEC isn't even on here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be a
Okay.
long meeting.
I think we,
Something needs to move, how's that?
yeah,
No,
well, I'll
that-
work
that's an
with,
easy one
I
to
think
move.
it's the athletics, I think we move that.
Maybe we'll be in the playoffs.
Yeah. That's a nice kind of that's a good June thing, right?
Yeah, I'll put her June 11th.
Okay.
It looks full, but most of it's pretty
Yeah,
quick.
that's stuff
Fast,
pretty
so.
quick. Cool, yeah, thank you. And then we can have a full kind of roundup from her. Great. All right, approval of minutes. We do have some minutes from our last meeting. Thank you, Leora, too, for stepping up. Appreciate it. You did a great job.
Sure. We're all still here, so. These minutes were unbelievably comprehensive.
Yeah. That's fantastic. She does a great job.
She does.
Um,
Madam Chair, I move that the school committee approve the minutes of the April 9th, 2024 school committee meeting.
Motion made and seconded, Amy?
She did.
Yeah, I did second.
Okay, any further discussion? You're lost? Do you need a minute?
No, go.
Okay, all in favor? All right, all opposed? I did watch the meeting, so I'm raising my hand.
Said
So
aye.
motion carries 4-0. Yeah. I was sorry to miss. Financial report.
Yep.
A warrant, warrants,
Two
yeah.
warrants. Madam Chair, I make a motion that the school committee accept warrant W41 in the amount of $250,178.69.
Second.
Motion been seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Motion carries 4-0. 4-2-0, excuse me.
Madam Chair, I also move that the school committee accept warrant W42 in the amount of $382,069.11.
Second.
Seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye, motion carries. Great, good job. Where are we here? Policy, Liz and I did meet. We'll have policy for the next meeting. It's fairly quick. So we'll put that next time. Any member reports? Amy?
I have two. I virtually attended the last select board meeting because I noticed on the agenda
Yes.
was 3 Worcester Street. The board voted to install 16 parking spots around the building to help as a compromise to add more parking to the common, while also allowing the school department to continue using the building. There was a motion made to turn ownership of the building over to the school department, and that was tabled or withdrawn. So I imagine it's gonna come back up again at some point. My other member report is that I will once again have the privilege of addressing our 8th grade civics students on Monday and Tuesday of next week. It's my favorite thing. I will teach them about municipal government, and how they are the legislative branch, so they will come to town meeting. I will also teach them about the school committee, what we do and how that impacts them,
Awesome.
and why it's important to vote.
I know you love that so much, Amy.
I do love it. I'm gonna get stickers. I'll be the most popular person for 5 minutes.
That's
See,
awesome.
You're lucky. I not really mad. I got mad at my 8th grader because she said, in civics today, the teacher asked if anyone knows anyone on the school committee. And I didn't say anything. I said, what? You don't know? He's probably looking at you. He said, yeah, he was kind of looking at me a little bit, but I just couldn't get my hand up. Like, she's very shy.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, come on. But yeah, I just thought that
None
was
of them like it, really.
No, I feel bad for them. I mean, my kids at one point, they're like, they got both, and they're like, oh.
Well, I always promise not to
Yeah.
single out the students that I know because, in advance, because they get embarrassed. I promise I'm not gonna single you out.
8th grade's tricky.
But if you wave to me first, it's on. So, I'm excited. I'm dividing it up over 2 days, so I think it's gonna be a little bit less,
easier.
since I have rehearsals every night next week.
I know, that's awesome.
Timing does
Are
not
you
work.
doing bingo again?
Am I doing what?
Bingo? Aren't you doing bingo?
I am going to do town meeting bingo, yes.
Awesome.
Oh,
Get me in on that.
Okay, I'm taking suggestions if anybody
Oh,
has
awesome. I always have plenty.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. So we'll meet again before town meeting, so,
Oh, yeah.
anybody else on member reports? I'm sure that you all talked about it last time, but I wasn't here, so I'll just say, I attended, strictly as a school committee member, to the school play, Bye Bye Birdie. And,
Did talk
As a
about
school
it.
committee member?
I went as a proud mom. But great job to all of those students, cast and crew, so thank you to them.
it's been a while, so I'd forgotten. That it has, since we
It-
were at
yeah,
the
we
last
weren't
meeting,
here.
but yeah, I went as a school committee member too.
Yeah.
It's great.
Absolutely, yeah. And I don't have any correspondence. Jay, executive session, we probably don't need it.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, no executive session. Jay can update, I think. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none, all those in favor? Right at 9:00. Beautiful.
Wow.
Thank you so much. Good night, Grafton.